Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be doing a review of the GPD Win 4 2025. And it's this beautiful PSP Vita looking device right here. Now, I've actually reviewed this device a few times. There has been many iterations. The 6800U version, the 8840U version, the HX370 version, which is what I have right here. And so I've reviewed this over the last few years, and it's safe to say that I pretty much know the Win 4 at this point. Now, this year's refresh is pretty mild with all things considered. It is pretty much just the processor that's changed this year, and we are flying with the new HX370 CPU, and if you are curious how well that does, I did a full other video benchmarking it against the Asus ROG Ally X, so you get a good idea of performance and battery and all that sort of thing compared to a pretty hefty device already. But today it is all about the Win 4 2025, and we're going to talk all about this device. And we're going to separate this review into a few different categories. We're going to talk about the great, the good, and then the bad. First up, and we're going to do a very quick look at the specs and price. Now again, I have here the new Ryzen AI9 HX370 version with 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X, 7500 megatransfer RAM, and 2 terabytes of M2 2280 storage. The same 6-inch 1080p 60Hz screen as usual with the Win 4, nothing has changed there. Still has touchscreen, still has that beautiful slide-out keyboard that the Win 4 is known for. There's a little trackpad for mouse input in the bottom right, 46 watt-hour battery, Oculink port with a USB 4 port and another USB-C port, micro SD card slot, headphone jack, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2, and this is all going to set you back about $1,200 US right now, and that is shipped worldwide with my code Joey12 from What Geek's website in the description. So let's jump right into the great, and it's the performance. The long and the short of it is the HX370 is super good. It allows you to stick to 18 watts or 15 watts if you want, and you get the same or better, in a lot of cases, performance than the ROG Ally X, which you would need 28 watts to match what the GPD Win 4 can do. Now this also applies to the 8840U, which is pretty much on par with what the Ally X can do. So the long and the short of it is that this year's model, you can do a lot of what the last year's model did at the highest TDP range, but at a much lower TDP range. So it's better for a lot of heat and a lot of battery life, a lot of different things. Now there was one question that came up in the last video when I compared the Win 4 to the Ally X, and it was what wattage does the HX370 need to be to match the Ally X's 18 watt performance? So I did a few tests and I found that 14-ish watts on the Win 4 will get you the same as the Ally X's 18 watt performance. So yeah, that is not a big difference. It's not like it was 18 watts compared to 28 watts, but a 4 watt saving is still a savings. This is also where the Ally X's battery life will shine because of the 80 watt hour battery, and because there's not much of a difference there between 14 watts and 18 watts, it's where it really comes out ahead. So napkin math would put the Ally X at about 4.5 hours on the X, let's say. And that would be about 3 hours and 15 minutes on the Win 4. And this is if games actually capped at 14 and 18 watts, which we know they really don't, but it's just to help you give a visual representation of the difference there. Now I am using Bazzite on my Win 4, and I suppose I should do a quick tangent to let you know that there is currently a bug with Bazzite that your screen will sort of flash yellow or get a yellow tint in the menus occasionally on the Win 4, but I haven't really seen it in game. It seems to be just a Bazzite sort of issue in the menus, and I'm sure they'll probably fix it at some point in the future. It's not really a big deal, but I do have to mention it. But anyways, being able to run modern AAA games at respectable frame rates, or just being able to run older games a lot better on such a small device is the best part about the Win 4. The HX370 processor is the first where I felt that it can do true 40Hz or 60Hz gaming for a lot of games that were on the bubble on previous devices, like even the X. And so you don't really need high wattages to even do that. Now, unfortunately, it is still the same 6-inch 1080p 60Hz screen here, and it's just an IPS display, not OLED, and there's no changes on that front or variable refresh rate or anything like that. But thankfully, with Bazzite, it is actually pretty easy to cap to 40 Hz or whatever hertz you want to, and that's usually 40, to avoid any of the issues with not having VRR. But it is still a miss in 2025 to not have variable refresh rate, to not have OLED, to not have really any sort of upgrade at all. And it kind of speaks to this year's upgrade because they didn't put much effort into this one. Like, at least on the Win Mini, they upgraded the cooling and that sort of thing. They made some changes to the chassis, that stuff. With this, they kind of just put the new processor in and said, hey, off you go, and we're going to charge you about $400 more. When they could have done a lot more. The Win 4 is not perfect in any way, shape, or form, that it doesn't need upgrades. So yeah, this could have been done a lot better. It's a shame that the screen didn't get upgraded at the very least, but maybe next year, hopefully. But so let's go over to the good front here, and I guess the neutral part of all of this is it's the same design as previous Win 4s, for better or worse. That means, for those of you that love the PSP/Vita design that it has, the size of the device, the slide-up keyboard, and everything that we've gotten used to over the years, it is still all the same here. I actually have a love-hate relationship with the ergonomics. Some days I am perfectly fine with it, and then others I'm just not too happy with it. It's too bulky or it's digging into my hands, all that sort of thing. And so it's not super consistent on my end at least, and I'm kind of neutral on the ergonomics. Now, last year's model was the first where I actually used the keyboard quite a bit, and it's just easy to just pop out. You can do a little bit of typing and just do quick passwords, things like that, but not going to write the next American novel on this. I'm not going to be writing out full sentences, none of that. It's not great for that, but for very quickly just typing out a password, maybe pushing the Windows button and desktop to get to the desktop, all that sort of thing, it's super useful. But outside of that, I wouldn't say that it's a big game changer at all, in my opinion. And that's been kind of consistent in my feelings over all of the Win 4s in every year. Now, one good part about the screen that I actually like is it helps balance out the weight. I'll push it up, and then suddenly it helps balance out the weight a little bit more with the Win 4, and it's not so bottom heavy as you would expect. So that personally is probably the only thing that I like the screen for, or the keyboard part of it for, is just moving it up and then having a bit more of a better time there with how you look at it. You don't have to put your head down a little bit more, all that sort of thing. But the keyboard part of it, I could probably give up. I don't really care much about it. Because, again, with Bazzite, everything is fairly integrated, including their keyboard. So in a lot of actual scenarios, I don't really need to slide it up, but it is fun to do so sometimes. I keep going back and forth on my last year's conclusion of thinking this would be better without the keyboard, and you could save a bit of bulk and all that sort of thing. And I don't know, I could go back and forth on this all day long. I think the keyboard is a cool feature, in all honesty. I know a lot of people like it, but it doesn't do much for me. Now, another part on the good is surprisingly the battery life. This could be on the fence of both good and bad, depending on where you sit. But the HX370, as I pointed out earlier and in my previous video, allows you to play games at Ally X frame rates at a much lower TDP, and that lets you get actually really good battery life. Now again, this is still the same 46 watt-hour battery here, so no big difference, but you just get a lot more for your TDP than the previous 8840U model, and previous years. Given the fact that you don't need to go higher than 18 watt TDP on this device, it actually means the lowest end of battery is about an hour and a half or so for a heavy TDP game, as I showed in my previous video. And you can go all the way up to 9 or so hours in a very low TDP state. So it's quite the range for a lot of games. But I personally think that 14 watts and 18 watts are very good points to use this device at. And that puts you into the multi-hour camp for battery life, which is better than previous years. I still would like to see a bigger battery in here, but I'm just not sure they can fit one at this size. Okay, and now we get to the bad, and there are 3 main things that are pretty rough on this device, all things considered. The very first is the fan is just too loud. This can be negated by going lower than 18 watts, but in my testing, it's still even loud at lower wattages. I don't think they've changed anything fan-wise this year, but I have found the thermals to be a lot better than last year, which could be the chip, could be a variety of different reasons. I don't know, but I was surprised to notice that the heat wasn't so much of a problem this year. Now, you can, of course, try and customize the fan percentages and curves, but you're going to trade off heat for doing that. And so there's no real winning in both scenarios. A lot of the community tends to open these up, replace the thermal paste, and do all that sort of thing to help bring temperatures down, but that's just not something I want to do for a $1,200 device. I don't really know what the solution is to this problem. It is tough because of the size of the device and what they have to fit in here. I always point to the Ally X's fan and say, whatever you need to do to make that happen is what I want, but it's not realistic in every scenario. But it is still a negative because one of the things that was constant over me testing this device with benchmarks and everything is I had to leave the room with the fan noise. It was just too much. So that is my problem with this device. It's the fan curve. But let's talk about the other two issues. Obviously, next up is the price. Now, What Geek sent me this device for review. And with my code Joey12, you can get this shipped for $1,200 worldwide. And that's all linked in the description. But $1,200 is still a lot of money, mainly because the HX370 chip is so expensive. And so you're going to see a price increase throughout this year for any devices that use this chip. And pricing is going to be a lot more expensive than the previous 8840U models. Even my current favorite x86 device, the Ally X, is $800 shipped, and $400 more is a lot to ask for a Win 4. This obviously changes depending on where you are in the world, but I have to go by what I know, and I don't think there's $400 more or better in the Win 4 than the Ally X, unfortunately. But this brings me to the last issue, and probably the most important issue because it is a hardware problem. We have recently discovered, or I guess recently been popular in finding out, that the Win 4 actually has 50 milliseconds or 3 frames of input lag on all of their devices. This all goes back to even the 6800U model. It's been years, and it has somehow been missed every single year. Now, I should mention this. Personally, if you hadn't told me that this had an input lag issue, I never would have known. I never would have figured it out. Never was a thing because even in my previous reviews, never came up. Never really noticed it. But that doesn't mean it isn't an issue, and it doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that are going to be susceptible to it. So you should know there are 3 frames of input lag or 50 milliseconds of input lag added on, all because of the rotated panel. And unfortunately, their fixes aren't that great. So the kind of good news, bad news is there is a fix available for every single model. However, for every model except for the 7840U model, it is actually a hardware flash. And I looked at the steps, and it is beyond even something that I would want to do. But thankfully, 7840U users can get it done with a software fix. So long story short, they haven't fixed this at the factory level. This exists on every single Win 4. If you have the HX370 and every other model besides the 7840U, it is a hardware fix, and it doesn't look very easy to do, and it's not something I'm going to do. So that is a big negative here. That is a hardware issue. If you are planning to play any games where you think you might be susceptible to that input lag, then obviously this is probably not going to be the device for you, unfortunately. It is also limited to the Win 4. The Win Mini doesn't have this problem. The Win Max doesn't have this problem. All of that, it is solely on the Win 4, and it's unfortunate. But hopefully if they do replace the screen next year, which again goes back to the fact that they did nothing this year, they could have replaced the screen, maybe we can avoid this issue going forward, but have to mention it for this review. Okay, so otherwise, overall final thoughts here. If you like the Win 4, maybe you have the 6800U version, you've been eyeing this and thinking, is it a better upgrade? The answer is yes. If you like it, this is just a better Win 4 in every single way. So yeah, this is the best iteration of the Win 4 by far. However, if you have no interest in the Win 4, or maybe you've looked at it in the past and you're like, I don't know if this is for me, there isn't anything here that I think would change your mind. There isn't anything new or different besides the processor that would make you think anything different, unless power was your real concern in the past, in which case then yeah, it's a better one, but Otherwise, not much different here to change your mind. Now, if you're asking me what I think, my advice is still the same as I've been saying for a few months now, and that is just to wait because, again, by the summer of this year, we're going to see a lot of announcements for x86 devices. We have Microsoft's coming out, we have the Ally 2 probably coming out, Legion Go 2, the Zotac Zone 2, all of these devices and x86 handhelds coming out this year. I don't know if any of them will be in the same size, price, or spec range as this, but it's probably a better time to make that decision over the summer than right now because you don't know what's coming out. And this hobby is about to explode on the x86 front because of how many companies are jumping into this pool. So the price of this doesn't really give you any FOMO into needing it right away. But again, if you do like the Win 4, then yeah, maybe this is something that will be better for you because it's just a better Win 4. Personally, I'm really hoping that 2026 will bring a better design on the Win 4, better screen, changes to the ergonomics, changes to everything. They could do a lot more here that I just think they've been lazy on for whatever reason. So more effort next year, hopefully. And that's going to be it for today. So what do you think about the Win 4 2025? Personally, I think the Win Mini 2025 is a bit more interesting to me. I saw it at CES and I saw the changes they made to the cooling there, plus adding this processor and everything. That could be a very good one. So I'm going to see if I can get my hands on the Win Mini. But what do you think about the Win 4? Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk all about handhelds like this one. Support me on Patreon if you like my stuff. And hope you all have a good one.